activities to girls, and this is a bit of an update. And it could be a lot of what I say to you, you're totally familiar with and everything's comfortable. But for other things, it's just a prompt and a reminder, and things that we've all learnt. So if you have a particular thing that you'd like to suggest to other people, something you learnt or something that's worked particularly well that you think other people would benefit from, again, pop it into the chat section, the questions section, and then I'll be able to add that in. I did a very good session with mothers and daughters yesterday, and again, it reminded me of a lot of things that often go out of my head once I'd finished the session. Oh, if only I'd remembered to include that. So it's about continually reminding ourselves what it is that works, what we learn as we go along, what can be improved, and what advice we're trying to give. So let's just go back and remind ourselves what we're trying to achieve. And this slide just tries to remind us that this is about making sure the girls have opportunities. We're not trying to get girls to be scientists or to be engineers. There's far more to life than simply being a scientist or an engineer, but it's having the science background, the science knowledge, the science confidence that can lead us, all the girls, to accessing the higher status jobs. And the point I made to the mums yesterday is the pay gap, gender pay gap, it's not related to the fact they get paid less because they're female. Often women are paid less because of the choices they've made and the qualifications they have lead to lower status and lower paid jobs. And this, many of them fed back to me, was interesting to them. They hadn't realised the consequence of the subject choices that are being made. And I think we need to highlight this, because it's only if the girls get access to all of the full range of roles that we can actually use their talents are recognised, and then they can be participating and contributing to all aspects of society. But at the end of the day, the important thing is for the girls to be happy and successful. That, to me, is paramount. And in order to do that, they've got to be able to understand all of the options, all of the consequences of everything they do, and everything that could happen once they are fully qualified, that all those options are open to them. So at the end of the day, it would be great to get more women at all levels in the STEM workforce, but there's a job to do to get that far. Now, you'll be familiar with the research, and if we move on to the summary of research screen, you'll remember that there is no issue with girls doing science. They outperform the boys in all subjects at all levels, up to degree level, including apprenticeship. So if it's ever questioned that girls can't do any subject, the answer is the research shows absolutely they can. And it isn't about girls avoiding hard subjects. They outnumber the boys in medicine and veterinary science. And it's not about them avoiding maths. The trend in maths is rising. It's over 40%. And 40%, it's not 50-50. But if we're worried about 40% girls in maths, we should be worried about 40% boys in biology, and we should also be worried about 35% girls in economics. But as I found to my disappointment, it's physics. We've had a lot of impact in getting girls to do other sciences, but the percentage of those taking physics that are female has not changed in 35 years. All of those activities that people advocate, masterclasses, hands-on, wow events, whatever they are, they're not making an impact on a large number of girls. So if I move to the next slide, this is what the research shows, whatever people tell you. Competitions for girls, they'll join in, they'll enjoy it, they'll applaud the winner, and they'll go away with the subliminal message, I lost, it's not for people like me. You can do the excitement, the inspiration, but it doesn't change minds. It consolidates their thinking, but it doesn't change minds. The research is clear on that. And role models, again, not a bad idea, but we have to be very cautious how we use them, because if they are very high power, very high achieving girls, while we admire that, a lot of the girls at the age we're talking about are still struggling to have confidence in their own ability, and it makes them believe they would never ever achieve that. If we use role models, they need to be human and show failures, and I will tell my stories of failure as much as anybody in this, because the girls warm to that. But on top of that, this isn't the only thing that we can do. The people like me must only ever be seen as one part of a complete program of intervention. So a school should be recommended to do as many different aspects as they can. 5 is a minimum, the research shows. Beyond that, it's good, but below that, any one doesn't make a difference. The issue that makes our sessions different is the issue of language. The fact that girls need to believe that they will fit in and that they will belong, and this is not peculiar to young girls, this is women across the generations. And then we're going to get to realise that mums are pivotal, and without mums we're not going to make any difference, because mums are cautious. They want their daughters to be happy. If they don't think their daughters can be happy in the world that we're talking about, they will caution against it, and it takes a very strong-willed girl to go against her mother. Some do, but the majority don't. I've just been asked if we're going to get the copy of the slides. Very happy to circulate those afterwards, and this whole performance, this whole presentation is being recorded, so you will be able to go back and retake it or recommend it to other people who haven't been able to log in. Okay, so moving on then. Just to remind you very briefly, if you're doing one of these sessions, clearly it helps to have reread all of the introductory pages. The first 10 pages are the introduction, the myths and the theory. It helps to do that just to remind ourselves of the things that make people like me different. You'll take along copies of the quiz, the vocabulary, the analysis, and the flyers. Now, the schools will often print these for you, I have found, rather than you having to carry large numbers. But if you're reluctant to ask the school to print a great deal of stuff, just ask them to do the quiz and the flyers, the bits that the girls take away. And if you can carry the adjective sheets and the large analysis sheets, but take them back in and then use them for another school, then that's quite reasonable. The poster for the schools, if you can get a copy of that printed, is great. The schools love posters. And then, depending on your chosen session, a short session or a longer session, you clearly take your chosen case studies, or you take ambassadors who might come from your own company or be provided by STEM Learning. Now, in case you haven't seen, we've now got 7 different versions of people like me. It's growing all the time, and these relate to different sectors. We've got physics, we've got oil and gas, we've got electronics, we've got digital, we've got specific ones for network, rail, construction, I think, is in progress. If you want to focus on a particular sector for a school because they're doing an event on engineering or digital, then choose the particular resource that features those jobs. But whatever you do, when you do the analysis with the girls, point out that the jobs they are seeing on the analysis sheet are a tiny collection, only a subset of the total that could be done by somebody like them. And if they want to know about the other jobs, then the online and the website, they can look at the other jobs that they could do depending upon what types they come out as. We've been asked by some girls to say, can we have more information about the jobs? I don't know what the jobs are. This makes good homework. So don't expect the girls or the teachers to know what all the jobs are, but this is an opportunity for them to research them. So if I move on to the next screen, just to remind you, the whole point about the session, it's not about using the word scientist or engineers. And in particular, emphasize it's not about their academic abilities. I've found that a lot of girls who've already decided they can't do this sort of thing because they're not that good in school, and therefore you're not talking to them. They'll join in and do it, but they genuinely don't think you are talking to them. So emphasize this is about them as people and not about academic abilities. And if you can highlight people who are not the academic high flyers, who are examples of case studies, that helps. But this is to do with how they're thinking about themselves going forward, and it's part of what they take into account. They have to think about what they like to do, but also they have to think about the sort of people they are. And I do like to emphasize for the girls that it is about them being happy. And they actually warm to that, I find. It's not just about how smart you are or how many brownie points you've got. It's actually about how can we actually end up with a job that you like doing. And again, I use anecdotes of my own here, and it's always worth adding anecdotes of your own about your own experience of choice of job, and particularly if you've changed job, that helps. So moving to the session, just to remind you briefly what it comprises. The purpose of the icebreaker, where they write their name, either their address or school, I sometimes ask them to do, this is to show them what it means to work in a way that is not your preferred option. And I emphasize that life is like that. If they are in something that doesn't suit their natural way of working, it will be possible. They can do it because they're determined, but they will find it hard, they will find it tedious, they'll find it stressful, the quality of the output won't be good. And that is the whole point of making choices, is to find something that suits their natural way of working, because that way they will be able to work successfully, happily, less stress, more fluidly, greater quality of output. So this is just an introduction, but also it sort of lightens the atmosphere a bit, and it makes them realize that you're actually quite a nice person because you're quite happy to do fun things, and then they can get started on the quiz. So the quiz itself, for the next slide. This business of the 5 plus 5, people keep asking me about, why are we doing it 5 plus 5 and then more adjectives. I've tried it by asking them to do 15 in one go, and all they do is tick the top 15. It doesn't work. Asking them to do 5 is deliberate because they think much more carefully about it. But again, what I discovered again yesterday reminded me, we do have to tell them to be honest about the ones that really apply to them, not the ones they would like to believe. And if you're doing a mothers and daughters session, try to make sure the mums don't influence the daughters. I've had a lot of mums peering over shoulders saying, oh, but you aren't very neat, why have you put that? And I don't think that's very helpful. So try to emphasize the honesty. You will come across girls who say there are no negative adjectives. I find that rather sad, if I'm honest. But again, let's say to them, we're not interested in the negative. We know there's so much positive about you. This is what I'm interested in. Let's find the positive. Then they'll say, but I don't know which ones are positive. That's the point when you say, well, ask your friends. And I found that the girls' friends are often so supportive and so affirming, the girls start smiling to think their friends really think those things of them. So it's actually quite a nice way in which the girls can think better of themselves if their first inclination is to the negative. Now, one of the issues of this is that girls like choice, and we must keep emphasizing that what we're trying to do is to show them the range of choices. Sadly, a lot of teachers don't know the range of choices available from science qualifications. They often think the only thing you can do from science is become a teacher or a scientist, whatever that means. And they give out negative responses to the kids when they're asking about, well, what can I do with my subject? So keep emphasizing this is about them ending up with a great deal of choice. Moving to the next slide, schools will ask you about, do we have to do it for the girls? We want the boys to do this too. Please do resist having boys in the sessions. 2 reasons. First of all, at the time when we're targeting the girls, which is key stage 3, they are at the point of creating their self-identity. They're becoming self-aware. They are thinking about who they are and where they fit in the world. And typically, at that age, boys are not. They take longer to reach that level of maturity and self-reliance. If you particularly want to do a boys' session, then they need to be 15 plus. I have included boys in sessions when I was trialing. They look uncomfortable. They don't like it because they feel vulnerable. They are exposing themselves. They feel it's not something they should be talking about publicly. So they have to be much more mature to be able to adapt it. It's not that this as a process can't be used with males. It's a matter of the sessions. Just to clarify an answer to a question, Key Stage 3 is the first 3 years of senior school. That's 11 to 15. 14. My preferred age is 12, 13 and young 14. I find if they're 11, they're still not quite ready. And by the time they're 15 plus, they've often made their mind up. And unless your quiz comes out with the answer they want, they will decide it's wrong. And we don't want that. We want them to be open-minded. So it's very much about targeting the girls at the age when they're ready for it, but not that bit too late when they're not open-minded. People often say to me, primary, please don't do this at primary again. They're not yet ready for it. However, what I will say is we are contemplating a primary version. And if you have any access to any access to funding where they'd be interested in funding a project for primary age, please let us know, because at the moment the barrier is we don't have the funding. And the other thing is we've had feedback when schools have asked to do this with very large groups, a year group of a couple of hundred. I don't find that that works so well because the girls don't feel you're talking to them, they feel anonymous. So please keep it to class sizes. I personally would suggest if the school says we want all our girls to do it, well, do it sequentially, one group after another. You might be able to go up to 40 in a group, but I wouldn't go beyond that if I could help it. I did a group yesterday evening, mums and daughters, and to be honest, it was a bit big. I had 150 total. I wouldn't recommend that. I had to have 5 helpers going around, looking over people's shoulders, encouraging them how to fill in the quiz to support me in that. But I did feel it was difficult to draw them in. Moving to the next slide. When they've done their analysis, and the point of the analysis here is very much about not directing them, not predicting what they're going to do, but giving them a sense of the range of aptitudes they have and therefore the range of things open to them. And particularly saying to them, if you don't like what you've come out as, find one you like. I'm not sticking to the answers for the quiz. If they say, oh, I've come out as an explorer and I don't really think I'm an explorer, I'm more of a developer, well, great, go with developer. The case studies are useful, and I've reminded you again on this slide there are 7 sector-specific packs, and these case studies allow the girls to listen or read about girls who are like them and how their personality types, their attitudes suit them to the roles they're taking. And it's quite nice to give them a chance to see somebody starting at all sorts of levels. We've got apprentices, we've got people who've done A-levels, we've got people who've done degrees. And do choose your analysis and case studies according to the girls you're working with. Choose them according to the subject area and choose them around the topic and the types of girls you've got. You might actually then use real role models. This is a much more ambitious activity and it takes a lot longer. You need a much longer slot in the school day. You wouldn't fit it into a lesson. You'd probably need a half day. I've used this. It does work really well. The role models need to have been briefed in advance, that they talk about who they are as much as they talk about their job. And you can either have girls at tables where the role models move around, or you can have the girls choose to go to a table where a role model is the same type as they are. I've had a very long question come in, and I'm just going to take 2 seconds to read it so that I can answer it. Right, the question is about triple award, and I'm absolutely in agreement with the person who's asked this question. So for the people who are not familiar, at the moment at the age of 14 when they start their GCSEs, the option is to do triple award, which means they do they study the 3 separate sciences, but they get a triple award worth 3 GCSEs. They don't get separate marks for the 3 sciences, so they get a grade that covers the 3. Double award, they essentially do 2/3 of the syllabus for each of the 3 subjects. So they're still doing all 3 subjects, they do less of it. And as the questioner has pointed out, the school that she's dealing with, only the top sets will take the 3 subjects. Only the top sets will take triple award. The remainder will take double award, and this is reinforcing the fact that the cleverest do science and the rest don't. I agree completely, and schools should. I'm actually campaigning at government level to get triple award banned. A lot of schools will not allow girls or anybody to do A-level if they didn't do triple award, and so girls, not even knowing the consequence of their choices, are choosing double award, often because they want to take an extra broadening subject, a language or music or something, and they end up doing double award and then are told they can't do A-level. So if we can get schools to stop limiting those who do triple and have a level playing field, I think it will help. But I am equally concerned that this decision made at 14 to do double then comes back to haunt the girl, even though it wasn't her fault. And in fact, schools do recommend double for girls more often than they do for boys, and statistically girls are less likely to take triple than boys. So it's not helping. Okay, moving on then. We're going to the mums and daughters thing. This is something that I did yesterday. I find these very powerful. The research is clear, mums are the biggest barriers to daughters pursuing a STEM career. Now, I know everybody can provide me with an anecdote of a mum who didn't really want their daughter to do a STEM career, but daughter did it. True. But at the same time, there's an awful lot where the mum's influence has prevented the girl going forward. So if we're not talking to the mums, we're actually missing an opportunity. Now, I don't insist that it's a mum. It's anyone who's a mum or a daughter, so that's actually any female, to be honest. I had a session about a month ago. A woman came along. She said, oh, I couldn't bring my daughter. She's doing guides, but I've brought my mum instead. So we actually had a mum and a grandma, and they thoroughly enjoyed it. So the mothers and daughters tend to be done in the evening. It's quite nice to have it as a reception with nibbles or biscuits and coffee or wine, depending on the school. And it's quite a relaxed atmosphere. It's quite nice for the daughters and mums to have a chance to talk to each other. Moving on to the next session, next slide. Keep in mind that young people have these fears. They fear being bored. They fear being friendless or isolated, and they fear that if they're making a decision where they'll be trapped and there'll be no way out. So we need to reinforce the messages that what we're offering here is something where they won't be bored. There are going to be lots of people like them with whom they are going to be friends, and there will be changes, options to change direction. There will be choices. So keep emphasising that, because that's what they're thinking about. Now, I've had a question saying females think STEM won't make a happy career because they believe they will not have friends, because they'll believe they'll be the only girl, all the boys will be a group together, they will be isolated, and having a friend is part of being happy. They don't think they'll fit in. And the sense of belonging and the sense of fitting in is something that women feel is necessary to be happy. So the reason why women, girls and mothers, believe a STEM career won't lead them to be happy is they fear that they will be isolated, they will not have anyone to talk to, they will not have friends around them. And that's why we have to point out that that isn't actually the case. Next slide. The PowerPoint presentation that you can use at the end. It's not compulsory, you don't have to use it, but schools often like a consolidating session. So it's called Opening Doors. It's supposed to emphasize the fact that having science in their portfolio of subjects leads to a much broader range of options. They're not going to end up in a dead end. So it's all about showing the range of things available. Most of their advice will come from friends, parents, family, teachers, and often they are not aware of the full range of opportunities. So this is our opportunity to say, look at the things you can possibly get onto. So teachers often tell me at the end, I hadn't realised there were that many jobs available. And one of the points of the Opening Doors is we don't even know what the jobs will be in the future. So part of the issue is saying you need to make sure you're qualified in all sorts of areas, with STEM included, because that's where the jobs will be, even though we can't tell you what they're going to be called by the time you get to the age of 20, 30, 40, and so on. Now, a lot of people, when they're giving the talk, they say, oh, it's the attraction of travel. While that is an attraction for some people, it isn't attraction for all. There are some groups and some cultures for which the need to travel would be seen as a barrier. Some girls at the age we're talking to them, the idea of being alone on an aircraft is daunting. And it takes a while and a degree of self-confidence to move to a stage where you think you'll be able to do this. So travel isn't always quite the attraction. Mention it, but be aware that not everybody will share your enthusiasm for drifting off to far-flung parts of the globe. Moving on to the next slide then. The key messages. The purpose here at the end of the day is to make sure we get after GCSE, they keep science in their portfolio. What I don't keep saying is that they need to do the sciences. Now, this is something we need to emphasise for parents and for teachers. It is not necessary to do all 3 sciences or 2 sciences and maths at A level. It's perfectly reasonable and, in fact, to be encouraged that they take a broader mix. It's certainly also not necessary that they take 3 languages or 3 humanities. It's better that they mix. Very few degree subjects specify more than a single subject, particular named subject for A-level. They specify A-levels, and they often name 1 A-level. A lot of subjects don't name any A-levels, so you don't have to have studied the subject in advance. My daughter did philosophy and economics, never having studied either philosophy or economics at A-level, and she did pretty well out of it, and there was no requirement that she'd done them. The only alternative there is engineering, which frequently requires physics and maths, but a lot of engineering departments are now looking at whether that is still reasonable, and I'm aware of a university that's being set up in Hereford that will not require either physics or maths in order to do engineering. If they have somebody coming in without physics and maths, they will provide them with the foundation course. Please emphasize the idea of mixing. Re-emphasize the fact it's not about being a scientist and engineer, it's about actually being well qualified for a STEM and technology business, and it is business that is the attractive bit, and it's business where the gap is. We're not short of scientists, if I'm honest. We've got loads of scientists in universities. In fact, there's too many PhD students disappointed they can't get their jobs. Do you have to have a maths A-level to do a chemistry degree? It depends on the university. Some say yes, some say no. It's not essential. What is a gap is the gap in businesses with people who have science backgrounds. So it's about making sure they're ready for all these new jobs, and particularly the increasing number of jobs that are going to expect science nous, science qualifications. So moving on, there is the thorny issue of salary. Don't be afraid of talking about salary, and if you're comfortable about talking about your own salary, talk about starting salaries. Now there are salaries listed on the opening doors PowerPoint. I tend to preempt this with, some of you will think this is really interesting and some of you will think it's a bit awkward. And by saying that, it just takes the sting out of it for those who think it's a bit awkward. But most people think, feedback to me, I didn't realise what a difference it made. I didn't realise how much of an impact my subject choices had on the sort of salary I will get. And it does reinforce the fact that the subjects that girls take usually end up in the career areas that are less well paid. At the end of the day, though, we're not suggesting anyone takes anything in order to earn the money. We're not advocating you choose your career on the basis of the salary. All I'm doing is providing information. At the end of the day, they should do something where they're going to be happy. Moving on, this is something that is becoming an undercurrent that you may not be aware of. Most of us are familiar with A-levels. They are continuing, but they've been cut down in number. The range of A-levels that have been available over the last few years has actually been reduced, and they're now the pure subjects only. There are no applied A-levels, and they have one single intention in life, and that is to prepare somebody for university. They are not intended to prepare people for the world of work at all. Alongside A-levels, there's a new thing called T-levels or tech levels being introduced that are the same demand, the same level of difficulty, the same number of contact hours in teaching, the same number of UCAS points for going into university, but they are the applied subjects. So you can do an A-level in physics or maths, or you can do a tech level in engineering or business or many other vocational subjects. And then, clearly, there's apprenticeships at 16. And the point now is, if you hadn't spotted it, nobody can leave school at 16 unless they're going to an apprenticeship. If you're not going into an apprenticeship, you have to stay on to 17, and soon it will be 18. And if you stay on to 17, you'll either do A-levels or T-levels, or if you're not qualified because your GCSEs aren't quite good enough, you'll do a transition year, which should lead you either at 17 to an apprenticeship or to A-levels or to T-levels. Now, it's worth you being aware of this. Not all schools will offer T-levels. A lot of FE colleges will offer T-levels, and if you're involved with the UTC, the University Technology Colleges, they are designed, the T-levels are designed for those. So those are the options. Again, I've got a long question that's just come in. I'm going to have to take 2 seconds just to read it. Oh, I've got someone saying that her daughter's opted for double science. She's being put off by the boys saying she's a nerd. Yes. And this takes a very strong-willed girl to overcome that. It is a difficulty. All I can suggest is you keep supporting her. Suggest she might take the People Like Me activity and see if that gives her more confidence to say, no, I can do this, and tell her she will outperform the boys, without a doubt. Key point then, things are changing, and we need to be aware of that, so we shouldn't just keep talking about A-levels, but do also be aware apprenticeships can start at 16, but equally they can start at 18. And if you've done A-levels or T-levels, then a higher apprenticeship at 18 is a very good way to move on from there. And if you don't want to do an apprenticeship that is a higher level, that would be equivalent to HNDs, for those of you who are familiar with the old-fashioned qualifications. You can very soon do a degree apprenticeship. You will be an employee of a company rather than a student. You will not have a student loan. You will be paid a salary, and you will have day release or block release at your chosen university, and you will study a degree alongside your job. Those are coming. A couple of universities have them already, and increasing numbers will soon offer those. So apprenticeships will be not just age 16 and will cover a huge range of topic areas. On to the next. These are hints and tips. This happened to me yesterday. A number of people, as I wander around, they're struggling to pin themselves down to adjectives. Now, the research itself does identify that some of us self-identify using adjectives and some self-identify using verbs. Statistically, there's a higher probability of those who self-identify using verbs having gone into science. And interestingly, I've also discovered there's a higher probability of men who self-identify using adjectives having gone into politics and civil service. No idea why, but that's just a fact. If they are finding the adjectives hard, point out that this is just about them. It's for everyone. It's about who they are. And they can ask their friends for help. But if they really are worried about it, say, it doesn't really matter. Just choose the ones you like. Nobody's going to get it wrong. It's not going to be a problem. Say it quietly to them. And they, as long as they're ticking something, they don't stand out as failing to fill in the form, failing to do the quiz. And therefore, they can at least join in with everyone else. It is all about aptitude. Please don't use the word talent, because a lot of people take that to mean I have no chance of ever doing this because I'm not talented. But aptitude, it's a natural thing. Everybody accepts that they have an aptitude. They won't have heard of all the jobs. Make a point of saying you won't have heard of all the jobs. You can go away and look at them. Point them at the WISE website, which has information about jobs. And as I will say in a moment, there's a poster that lists a whole load of jobs that they can look up, and it makes a good homework. And the girls won't know all the words, but that's normal in a learning experience. So if they don't know the words and they're having to read them off the sheet, well, that's good because they're learning the words. I've had some people say to me, oh, but they find the words hard, but that's called learning. We don't want to give them something that isn't a challenge. But absolutely, look beyond, getting the girls to look beyond the usual jobs, beyond the doctor, lawyer, hairdresser. I know I stereotype a bit, but you know what I'm getting at. Now, the teachers themselves, if you can take a poster, that's great. You have the PDF available on the website. You can get it printed. There's also, I've thought about the fifth bullet point down, a jobs poster called 101 Jobs. If you get that printed, it's rather nice too. And it's a whole range of jobs to remind them and put them on the website. You may use STEM learning to provide ambassadors if you're going to be ambitious to have an ambassador session for your intervention with the school. But if you don't, still point out that their local STEM learning office can provide ambassadors with all sorts of backgrounds to come in and talk to the girls, either as an individual or as groups. Many ambassadors, disproportionately large numbers of ambassadors are young women, because they're particularly keen. Do suggest that this is part of an ongoing intervention. A single intervention makes almost no difference. Certainly suggest that they might like to invite you back for the younger year group the next year, or they might like to contact WISE for some other activity, or contact STEM Learning, which has a wide range of activities that target careers and STEM qualifications. It would be great if you could suggest they become members of WISE as a school, and also the individual teachers, if they could be members of WISE. Clearly it doesn't cost the individual teachers to be anything to be members of WISE, and they get all sorts of information for themselves, but also for their girls. And the girls themselves might look at opportunities for apprenticeships or scholarships on the WISE website, so there's a bonus there. But the school itself, if it becomes a member, then it has advantages too. Oh, I've gone forward one yet. Can I go back one to the previous slide? Yes, no? Oh, well, the previous slide also gave a web link, and you will get the slides. For the teachers. Oh, okay. I've moved forward, okay. Post-event, on the pack, page 15, has a number of suggestions of homework that the teachers might suggest as a follow-up session on the day you've been in, or possibly on another occasion. It could be to research a female scientist that they've seen in the media, Maggie Adder in Pocock, or Maggie Philbin, or what's her name, Alice Roberts. There's a whole host they can think of. Quite a nice group activity is to come up with a job starting with each letter of the alphabet and groups of girls. And this is where the WISE 101 jobs poster actually has a job from pretty much every letter of the alphabet. But see how many jobs they can come up with that need STEM that fit to each letter of the alphabet. And the Opening Doors presentation has a slide in it where they can relate the cost of housing, council tax, living costs to salaries. So they could do a reverse engineer. How much do you think your house will cost? How much will your council tax, rent and so on cost? How much will it cost you to live on a week-by-week basis? In which case, how much do you need to earn? And I've heard many teachers have used this as an activity as part of citizenship, where they get a much greater idea of what the world is like. And it's quite an eye-opener as to how much it's going to cost them for the chosen lifestyle. Whether they achieve, that's another question. I was fascinated. I actually quite like to do a, would you like to guess how much people earn on average in the country yesterday? And I had girls putting their hands up suggesting everything from £5,000 a year to £82,000 a year. Fascinating. It's also quite interesting to contrast the average, which is £26,000 a year at the moment for the average in the UK, with minimum wage, which people have all heard of, which a salary full-time minimum wage is a bit over £14,000. And of course, it's also interesting to point out they don't receive all of that for the simple reason that there's tax and national insurance, which of course they also probably haven't thought of. So it's quite a nice activity as a follow-up. Now, I haven't had any more questions since the last two. If you do have questions, now is your time. Oh, here we go. I've got a few more turning up. It says here, daughter has female role models. The friends don't share thoughts about it. It's a boys' subject. It is less of a problem in girls' schools. You're absolutely right. Statistically, girls in girls' schools are 2.5 times more likely to take A-level physics than girls in mixed schools, and that's not accounting for the fact that girls' schools are sometimes selective. This is even relating to girls' schools that are not selective. And on top of that, a really appalling statistic, half of all the mixed schools in the country, that's about 2,500 schools in the country, have no girls taking A-level physics at all, and a lot of the others have just 1 or 2. it might be worth challenging your school on the numbers of girls they have taking A-level physics and the strategies they have in place to make sure the girls don't feel intimidated, as is sometimes the case, as is sometimes described, and they do feel they can take physics. There's a very interesting report in the Institute of Physics website called It's Different for Girls, and it shows how girls in certain schools where the stereotyping is worse make very gendered choices. Okay, so I've got another question. Growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. Now, this is an attitude thing, very much. This is where I think if you talk in terms of aptitude, everybody agrees they have natural aptitudes, but a lot of children have learnt, sadly, through the education system that they are not academic. So the more that we can point out that there are STEM-related opportunities for people with all aptitudes as well as all abilities, and the T levels are deliberately for people for whom the academic pathway doesn't suit them, they're much more hands-on, they're much more work-focused, then everybody will continue learning. What you're doing is saying you're using your natural aptitude to develop skills in rather than academic. Often I use for my younger daughter the idea, you are going to peak when you start doing the things that suit your natural aptitudes. Okay, somebody asking, had the training, have never seen a request to provide it. My question there would be whether you contacted your local STEM learning office, because they are advertising it to their schools, and if they don't know that you have had the training and would be keen to go in, then they won't be able to contact you. So please do get in touch with the STEM Learning Centre, because they would be delighted to include you. The schools, the boys in mixed schools where they've worked with girls, what usually happens is that a school will timetable groups of a year group together. 2, 3 or 4 classes will be timetabled to do science at the same time. So what happens is the girls from those groups come to you, and the boys from those groups go to the teachers to do something else which the teacher does with them. So the boys aren't doing nothing, they are doing classwork, lab work or something else, and the teachers never object to the idea of separating kids out into ad hoc groupings. So they just take them into the lessons they would have been doing. Oh, so STEM learning provided the training. Well, perhaps knock on their door and say, are you really advertising this strongly enough to your schools? And see whether the schools would do it. If you know anybody in your area who has children in a school nearby that you'd like to visit, maybe the parents could introduce you to the science teacher and you could offer it directly to the school. We are trying to get the word out there. WISE itself has to rely on lots of other organisations to get it out there, because the WISE team is a very small team. Who do we speak to about finding out more about the primary version? Me, basically. We do require sponsorship. What would be really good is essentially crowdsource funding it, if we could. That's how we funded the current version that you've got, and you'll have seen the various names of the companies all across the bottom. Those were the companies who all put an amount of money in, ranging from 5,000 at the lowest level to 12,500 at the higher level. And they added all of their money up, and we then produced the project. Now, if some people wanted to coordinate to get crowdfunding from a range of companies to get a primary school version up and running, I would be delighted. We don't actually have the bandwidth at the moment to coordinate that, but I do know somebody called Alex Farrer who would be very keen to coordinate it if we had enough interest. So if there's anybody out there who thinks their company could be persuaded to come up with a few £1,000s towards this, can you contact me direct? I don't think my information's on there, but go via Shagusta, because she can always forward it on to me. So I would say if we can start at a 5,000 starting entry level, but if they wanted a bespoke pack with much more overt sponsorship, then rather more than that, and then we can add up until we get the total amount that we need. Any more questions? Have I missed anybody's question? Now is your chance to ask any final questions. It seems that you have asked all of your questions. I'll hang around online for a bit longer if you'd still want to ask questions. Oh, there we go. Oh, thank you for somebody thinks it's wonderfully interesting. That's great. Pleased that you found that. Again, if you have anything else you want clarifying, feel free to put it through on a question. But again, you can always come through to me. It would be great if you could complete the form every time you do a session. That way we get some feedback. And just for information, we're actually evaluating this, or Open University is evaluating people like me at the moment. I gave my group yesterday questionnaires to complete for this evaluation, and it's quite encouraging to see how positively it's received. If you're doing a session and you would be happy to have it evaluated, we provide you with the Word document. This is the questionnaire. The feedback questionnaire is only one side of A4. If you're doing mums and daughters, there's questionnaires for mums too, but it would be great if you could let us know that you're running a session, and then we can include you in the evaluation. The more we get, the better. We're setting up a LinkedIn page, as you can see from the slide that's in front of you. Oh, and it says about that. Oh, some feedback, here we go. Delivered a session in the school. That would be great. If you have feedback already, all of that is useful. And the idea of incorporating a governor, very smart. I find governors often have a particular enthusiasm. If you find a governor who is particularly keen on the gender perspective in STEM and they champion it in your school, that helps enormously. Will we be emailing you the recording after the webinar? I'm pretty certain Shagufta's going to make it available in some form. I'm not sure whether it's an email or what, but she will let you know. She has all of your contact details, so she'll be able to make sure you know everything that follows up. Any final questions? Well, I hope you found it useful. Again, I'll hang around a little bit longer. I've got a taxi booked for 11:05 because I've got to get on a train to London.